Hello everybody, welcome back to another light novel review. Today I am talking about volume number 4 in Kugane Maruyama's light novel series, Overlord. Now, at the end of volume number 3, it was revealed that there was a series of villages of lizardmen nearby the Tomb of Nazarick, and Ainz decided that it was going to be his first military operation to go and attack these villages for the sake of resources. So, in this volume, the Lizardman Heroes, we have that story of the very first military assault by the Tomb of Nazarick in this new world that somewhat seems to be similar to the game Yggdrasil, but yet is most obviously not. The weird thing about this book, and the one thing that I think will throw a lot of people off, is that the book focuses a lot more on the lizardmen. In fact, I would say probably about 2/3 of the book is told from the lizardmen's point of view. Now, this may or may not work for you depending on the fact of how much you like the lizardman characters. The other thing that sort of hinges on this book in terms of whether it succeeds for you or not is I don't think, I know I try to keep things spoiler free, but I'm pretty sure if you've read volumes 1, 2, and 3 of Overlord, you're pretty confident right now that if Ainz decides to take this really seriously, that eventually there is absolutely no way that a bunch of lizardmen are going to defeat the forces of Nazarick. So, in essence, the reason that you have to become invested in this book is you have to become invested enough in these lizardmen characters to see what happens to them, and invested in Ainz enough to ask yourself, so what happens next? What is he going to do if he succeeds in conquering this lizardman village? What are his actions going to be after that fact? The book sort of succeeds and fails in a couple of different ways. Now, if you've seen my first reviews on volumes 1 to 3 of Overlord, you know this is most definitely one of my favorite series. I really have enjoyed the series to date, and there were certainly a number of things that I enjoyed in this volume. First of all, I will say that whether you can, we can argue about how well this book succeeds, but the very fact that it changes things up, that instead of focusing so much on either Ainz or just a few denizens of the Tomb of Nazarick, in this case, it shifts the focus to those who are native to this world and are now encountering the forces of Nazarick for the first time. So it makes it a little interesting to me. It changes the point of view, it changes the experience a little bit. I think when we follow Ainz, when it's his story, because there's still a bit of a human element to him, I kind of feel like we still have a tendency to sympathize a bit. But when you're now with a bunch of people that basically views Nazarick as monsters and as invaders and enemies, it changes the narrative a little bit. And it really does sort of start to strike home this whole idea that the person we're rooting for is indeed a villain, that he's not quite an anti-hero. He's certainly sort of one step over that line into villain territory. I think the other thing that kind of, in terms of the lizardmen characters, I will say that I started to like them. The problem that I had with it initially was just that the way that their dialogue was written was full of just everyday colloquialisms, that it just didn't seem like this was a different race. It could have been any character talking. Their slang and everything else. It wasn't until kind of when we got a little bit further into the book that we met some characters, some lizardman characters, that had a little bit more personality that I kind of enjoyed and, became a little bit more invested in these characters. The other issue that I would say that I had with this book was with the portrayal of Ainz himself. Again, I'm trying to think of how to put this without really spoiling anything, but I guess it's really not spoilers. I've already told you that the majority of the book is the Lizardmen, but obviously part of the book is telling things from Ainz's point of view, or from the point of view from one or two of his minions from the Tomb of Nazarick. So when we have Ainz, when we're from his point of view, we still get that sense that there is still that lingering humanity. There is still those lingering doubts and questions that he has left over from his life as a human being. And those are definitely some of the parts that I would say intrigued me initially about this series, was this whole concept of how does this normal human being become this overlord, and how does he cope with this whole sense of having to be a monster in order to rule monsters, you know? And I think it gets really muddy in this volume. It hasn't been too bad up to this point. Definitely Ainz would make most of his decisions were based on self-defense or on the direct defense of one of his team. But in this one, instead, they are the aggressors. And it casts him in a bit of a different light. And the character, and again, I don't know if this is just because, I guess from a writing point of view, you could say that this is because at the one point when he's viewed by the lizard people, we're viewing him through their lens. And so because of that, we don't have all of his internal thoughts and everything else. And perhaps their perspective is biased. And then when we're viewing things from his perspective, of course, we get that inner voice, those inner thoughts. But it really seemed like from the Lizardman point of view, when he was in that point of view and they were the main point of view characters, Ainz really did seem to be this truly evil, malevolent creature, really having left a great deal of his humanity behind. And then we have this one scene in particular where it's from Ainz's point of view, where he really seems to indulge still in this idea that he was a human being and still seems to be filled with these kind of doubts and stuff like that. But on the flip side, when he has that moment, he seems so incredibly naive about what's going on around him. Again, I don't know how to, like, basically there's a resource that as a reader, you are very, very clear that it is human flesh is the resource. And you'd have to kind of be an idiot, I think, to think otherwise. And yet we get this point of view of Ainz at one point where it makes it seem like he's either A, completely clueless about it and has decided that, oh, it must be some kind of animal, or B, has deluded himself so much that he is escaping from that reality. And I'm fine with either, to be honest, as long as it was made obvious which one it was. But it's really not. It's kind of like, I guess the way that I guess what I'm trying to say, and I'm using some examples, but when it really boils down to it, the character feels really inconsistent in this book, and it feels like we have an author who wants his character to become a true hardcore villain, but at the same time is worried that as an audience we'll reject him being a full-blown villain. And so he keeps throwing these sort of weird moments out there that makes it seem like, oh, Ainz isn't really evil, it's just that he doesn't understand what's really happening. Which really comes into conflict when you're talking about the fact that he knows that they're attacking this lizard man village and that these are sentient creatures and that they do get killed. And yet he, at the same time, he doesn't seem to really care as much. It's, like I said, the character is so in flux in this one that it's just too inconsistent to me. That was kind of the thing that I think bothered me and irked me about Ainz in this one. I was like, you know what? Either own it and you're a villain, or tell us that there are doubts. Show us your doubts. Show us your remorse. Show us that there's still that element of humanity within you. But don't cherry pick your moment where it's like, all of a sudden the author was like, oh, here's a moment where I could remind them that he's not totally evil, even though it really doesn't make any sense. But whatever, just, he's not really evil. Don't hate him. it just, that's how haphazard it felt to me. Now, again, my opinion. Does it ruin the whole novel? No. In fact, there are quite a few things in this book that I thought worked quite well. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Cocytus, one of Ainz's generals, actually shows some progression as a character, and I became interested in him. I think what they're trying to do at this point is that each of these stories so far, focuses on one sort of main character of Nazarick. Shaltir obviously was in the last one. This one, it's Cocytus. So, like, in terms of execution, I think this worked well. It was interesting to me to flip and see Nazarick from a different point of view, from somebody who's not aware of them, somebody who, you know, is they are their enemy. They are honestly known to be a threat. It's not like they're curious about these people or whatever. No, like the Lizardmen know these denizens of Nazarick are the enemy. So it was kind of interesting to see them from a different point of view. I did enjoy that we continue to flesh out the other members of Nazarick, and that there are hints and stuff, and their stories are building that could go very interesting ways. We, of course, had some little interludes that sort of suggested the other big issue going on. Like, we know that Ainz is trying to defend himself against the possibility. Well, at this point, he's pretty much positive there have been other Yggdrasil players come to this world. We get a little bit more build on that sort of idea in these sort of interlude chapters, and of course introduced to some characters who will probably become antagonists soon. So there's still a lot of world building in this one. There's still a lot of character building. All of those elements I enjoyed, and I did eventually become kind of invested in some of these Lizardmen characters. I won't say all of them, but in some of them, I kind of enjoyed them. So overall, this book, still worth the read. I still enjoyed it, but unlike, I would say, volumes 1 to 3, there were definitely some bumps in this one. Some of them in terms of the writing choice, and probably the one that disturbed me or bothered me most was the character of Ainz himself. I just felt that with a character who has been so consistent and interesting for the first 3 volumes, that his character just seemed a bit too haphazard in this one, a little too sort of willy-nilly and altering himself at the whim of the author, who I think was afraid that the audience would turn against the whole series if Ainz went wholesale villain. Even though at this point, I'd kind of like, I'd just like to see that, actually. Like, I'd be okay with that, I think. But I mean, there should be some, they should build the whole death of his humanity, I think, up a bit more before they pull that trigger. But I don't think that would kill this series for me. In fact, I think I'd be more on board just to see that being a clear thing instead of this wishy-washy flip-flopping that we have that I don't really think makes a lot of sense. So those are my thoughts on volume number 4 of Overlord. Bit of a mixed bag. If you've really liked the series up to this point, I think you have to read this one. There are definitely events that happen in this that are going to play out in future volumes. I've heard from a couple of you that the future volumes are awesome. So I think this one's maybe just a little bump in the road. We'll see how things go when volume number 5 comes out, but still definitely worth the read. Still, in a lot of ways, I would say a slightly better narrative and story than what we get in some light novels. I was just kind of disappointed because the first 3 volumes have been so good that some glaring things in this one, well, it just bothered me because I figured the author could do better. So in the name of trying to keep up with catching up, my next review is going to be on volume number 9 of Reki Kawahara's Excel World. Yeah, I mean, I've been reading this since volume number 1, trying to keep up on the series. I actually really like this one as well. Volume number 10 is coming out this month, so I've let myself fall a ways behind. So I will be reading this one to try and catch up, so I'm not way behind when volume number 10 releases later this month. So that'll be my next review. And if you're brand new to the channel, don't forget to hit subscribe because, hey, if you love light novels, you want to catch all of my future light novel reviews, I really appreciate all of you joining me in this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.